Something is happening right now that's dividing human experience into two completely separate streams of reality. Not symbolically, not as metaphor, literally through quantum mechanics. Two versions of this planet, two distinct frequencies of existence pulling apart so drastically that people locked into one frequency band will become completely invisible to those who've shifted into the other. And if you're watching this transmission, if something beyond logic guided your attention here, if you sense that familiar electric pulse moving through your system right now, you've already been marked for inclusion in the 1% who will witness the quantum transformation that rewrites everything. This isn't spiritual fantasy dressed in scientific language. This isn't ancient prophecy repackaged for modern consumption. This is where quantum mechanics and timeless wisdom converge at the exact point where they're describing the identical phenomenon using different vocabularies. What the mystics named ascension and what physicists term quantum bifurcation are one and the same occurrence. Consciousness hitting a vibrational threshold where it can no longer maintain coherence within the current reality structure and must leap into higher dimensional existence. And that threshold is approaching with clockwork precision, whether your awareness has caught up to it or not. Do you sense it? That feeling of time compressing, of reality becoming increasingly unstable, of seemingly impossible occurrences manifesting with startling regularity. That's not your imagination playing tricks. That's the quantum field becoming destabilized in preparation for complete reorganization, like water nearing its boiling threshold. Molecules accelerating faster and faster until suddenly, quantum leap, phase transformation, total shift from liquid state to vapor. Earth is approaching its critical threshold, and when that transition happens, only those whose consciousness has achieved matching vibration will make the leap with it. The 1% isn't about being selected by some outside authority or proving worthiness through spiritual practice. The 1% is decided by vibrational frequency alone, by whether your consciousness has reached the resonance that aligns with where Earth is headed. You're not working to be chosen. You're either already oscillating at the frequency that marks you for selection, or you're not. And if you're here, if these words are landing with that specific quality of deep recognition that transcends mental comprehension, your frequency has already been identified. You're already part of the 1% being prepared for what approaches. Every ancient wisdom tradition foretold this moment, though translation and cultural interpretation obscured the quantum physics beneath the mythology. The Hopi described emergence into the fifth world. The Maya calculated the completion of one cosmic age and the dawn of another. The Vedic scriptures depicted the transition between great ages. Christianity encoded it as the rapture. Buddhism framed it as collective awakening, all of them pointing toward the same quantum occurrence, the moment when mass consciousness reaches critical threshold and reality itself transforms to accommodate the new vibrational frequency. But here's what makes this particular moment in history unprecedented. This isn't some distant future scenario. This is unfolding now. The quantum bifurcation has already initiated. Earth is already dividing into two separate frequency bands. Those who can sense it are already living in a reality that's radically different from consensus experience. Synchronicities that violate probability. Manifestations that bypass causality. Experiences of reality morphing that can't be rationalized by conventional psychology or physics. These aren't glitches. These are confirmations that you're already entering the transition. Right now, as you absorb these words, something is activating within your quantum field that cannot be reversed. A signature, a frequency marker, a quantum identifier that tags you as one of the 1% whose consciousness is prepared for Earth 2.0, the higher dimensional expression of planetary consciousness emerging from the current third density construct. You can't manufacture this activation. You can't force it through techniques or practices. It either occurs or it doesn't, based on whether your soul agreed to participate in this transition before you incarnated into this specific lifetime, at this specific moment in cosmic evolution. Take a breath, a deep one. And as you breathe, notice that this breath carries a different quality than the breaths you took before engaging with this transmission. Lighter, more energized, as if the air itself holds information, holds activation, holds quantum encodings that are downloading into your consciousness right now, without your rational mind even grasping what's occurring. That's not poetic language. That's actual quantum information exchange happening in this moment, through the medium of these words, through the frequency woven into this transmission, through the resonance between your consciousness and what's being conveyed. You're almost there. The threshold is so near. One more recognition, one more shift, one more moment of allowing what's attempting to emerge through your awareness. The quantum earth is calling. The 1% is assembling. The future occurrence that will divide timelines is approaching. And you, yes, you absorbing these exact words in this exact moment. You're being prepared for inclusion in the frequency that inherits the new earth, rather than remaining in the dissolving old one. Before we dive deeper into what the quantum division actually is, and how to ensure you're among the 1% who makes the transition, you need to grasp why this occurrence is essential. Why consciousness cannot evolve within the current planetary frequency. Why Earth must divide into two separate realities rather than everyone shifting together. Because once you perceive the quantum necessity of this separation, once you recognize the mechanics beneath the mythology, you'll stop resisting what's happening and start consciously aligning with the frequency that marks you for the transition. The first reason is vibrational incompatibility. Consciousness operates at specific energetic frequencies. Just as radio broadcasts transmit on different frequencies, and you can only receive the station you're tuned to, human beings exist at different consciousness frequencies and can only perceive the reality that matches their vibration. As Earth's foundational frequency rises, which it's doing exponentially, measurable through the Schumann resonance, those whose consciousness isn't rising in parallel experience increasing distortion, fragmentation, disorder, not as punishment, but as natural quantum mechanics of frequency mismatch. Consider it this way. You can't play a vinyl record designed for 33 rotations per minute on a turntable spinning at 78 RPM. The sound becomes warped, incomprehensible, chaotic. That's what's happening to those whose consciousness frequency remains locked in third density patterns, while planetary frequency accelerates toward fifth dimensional expression. They're not wrong or inferior or undeserving. They're simply out of alignment. And as the frequency gap expands, the only way to maintain coherent experience is division. Two separate realities operating at two separate frequencies, each inhabited by consciousness that matches that specific vibrational range. The second reason is choice and sovereignty of will. The universe doesn't impose evolution. Consciousness always retains choice about which direction to develop, which frequency to inhabit, which reality to experience. Some souls are prepared for a quantum leap into higher dimensional awareness. Others require more time in third density learning. Neither path is superior or inferior. They're simply different evolutionary trajectories. The bifurcation honors both choices by generating two timelines. One that continues third-density experience for those who need it. One that provides fifth-dimensional experience for those who are ready. Same planet, same moment. Two entirely different realities based on consciousness frequency. The third reason is cosmic timing. What's happening isn't random or arbitrary. It's a precise astronomical and quantum mechanical occurrence that happens at specific intervals in galactic evolution. Earth is completing a 26,000-year cycle called the Great Year or precession of the equinoxes. This cycle determines how much cosmic radiation and quantum information reaches the planetary surface. At cycle completion, a massive influx of higher frequency light floods the Earth, forcing everything to evolve or dissolve. Plants that can't handle the increased light die. Animals that can't adapt become extinct. Humans whose consciousness can't integrate higher frequency information experience it as crisis, chaos, breakdown. Those who can integrate it experience it as awakening, activation, transformation. The fourth reason is dimensional mechanics. Third dimension is the reality of dense matter, sequential time, linear cause and effect. Fifth dimension is the reality of malleable matter, multidimensional time, simultaneous causation. You can't experience both simultaneously without consciousness fragmenting. As Earth shifts from third to fifth dimensional frequency range, human consciousness must choose which dimension to occupy. Those who remain identified with dense matter, linear time, and separate self will naturally gravitate toward the timeline that maintains third-density construct. Those who've awakened to consciousness as fluid, time as navigable, and self as temporary perspective will naturally transition into the fifth-dimensional timeline. The division isn't about judgment, it's about physics. The fifth reason is collective field coherence. Reality is co-created by collective consciousness. For the new Earth to fully materialize, for the quantum possibilities of fifth dimension to actualize, those creating it must be frequency matched. If you mixed third-density consciousness into fifth-dimensional reality, the lower frequency would drag down the higher frequency through resonance, preventing full manifestation of quantum potential. By separating into frequency-matched groups, each reality can fully express its natural potential without interference from incompatible vibrations, pulling it toward different expression. But here's what's essential, and what most teachings overlook. The 1% isn't predetermined. It's decided by frequency in each moment. You could be part of the 1% right now and slip out of that frequency through fear, doubt, or unconscious choice to cling to familiar third-density patterns. Or you could not be part of the 1% yet, but shift into that frequency through recognition, through alignment, through conscious choice to release what's completing and embrace what's emerging. The selection is happening continuously, moment by moment, based on what frequency you're actually embodying, rather than what frequency you believe you're embodying or hope to embody someday. This is why this transmission matters. This is why these words found you. This is why your consciousness was drawn here at this exact moment in your evolution and in planetary evolution. You're being given quantum information that activates recognition of what's actually occurring beneath the surface chaos, beneath the collective fear, beneath the apparent randomness of everything that's falling apart. What appears as breakdown is actually breakthrough. What feels like termination is actually initiation. What looks like chaos is actually reorganization at the quantum level in preparation for the division that's already occurring in ways most humans can't perceive yet. There are specific indicators that confirm you're already among the 1%, that your consciousness has reached the frequency threshold that qualifies you for quantum Earth transition. These aren't signs you need to manufacture or achieve. They're natural phenomena that occur as awareness rises into fifth-dimensional frequency range. And recognizing these indicators, trusting what they're revealing to you, stabilizes your frequency in the range that ensures you'll transition with the planetary shift rather than remaining in the dissolving third density construct. The first indicator is timeline fluidity. You're experiencing moments where the past seems to change, where you remember events differently than others remember them, where occurrences you're certain happened turn out to have no record or evidence of existing. This isn't faulty memory or psychological confusion. This is consciousness beginning to exist simultaneously in multiple timelines as quantum Earth prepares to divide. You're already flickering between dimensional frequencies, already beginning the transition that will complete when planetary bifurcation reaches critical threshold. The second indicator is reality personalization. Your personal reality is becoming increasingly different from consensus reality. Things that seem impossible to others happen naturally for you. Synchronicities that statistically shouldn't occur are everyday experience for you. The laws of physics that constrain others don't seem to apply to you with the same rigidity. This is because you're already operating partially in fifth-dimensional physics, where consciousness directly influences matter, where intention collapses probability waves, where what you focus on manifests with shocking speed, because there's minimal delay between thought and form. The third indicator is dimensional bleeding. You're seeing, hearing, or sensing phenomena that aren't visible in third density frequency. Geometric patterns overlaying physical reality, light codes appearing in the sky or around objects, presences or entities that exist in adjacent dimensions, becoming perceivable at the edge of awareness. This isn't hallucination or spiritual delusion. This is your consciousness expanding into frequency ranges where you can perceive what's always been there, but was previously invisible, because your awareness was locked in narrow third-density bandwidth. The fourth indicator is soul memory awakening. Information flooding into your awareness about who you are beyond this lifetime, why you incarnated now, what your soul mission actually is. This knowing isn't coming from books or teachers. It's arising from deep within, from access to the quantum information field, where all your soul's experiences across all lifetimes exist simultaneously. You're remembering because you're approaching the frequency where individual soul memory and universal consciousness memory become accessible rather than remaining blocked by third-density amnesia that most humans experience. The fifth indicator is energetic sensitivity. Expansion. You can feel other people's emotional states, sense the frequency of spaces before you enter them, know immediately whether something or someone is aligned with your highest good. This isn't developing psychic ability. This is natural function of fifth-dimensional awareness, where everything is recognized as energy first and form second. You're perceiving the quantum field directly, rather than only perceiving the physical manifestations that appear after quantum waves collapse into definite form. The sixth indicator is relationship restructuring. People who've been in your life for years suddenly feel foreign, incompatible, impossible to connect with on any genuine level. Not because you or they have changed as personalities, but because you're literally vibrating at different frequencies now, and frequency determines who you can resonate with. Simultaneously, new people are appearing who feel immediately familiar, deeply connected, like you've known them forever. even though you just met. This is frequency matching in action. Quantum Earth gathering the 1% into clusters of resonance in preparation for the full transition. The seventh indicator is the pull toward something you can't name. A knowing that you're meant to be part of something vast, something transformative, something that will change everything about how reality functions. You can't articulate what it is exactly, but you know with absolute certainty that you didn't incarnate just to live ordinary life, just to follow conventional paths, just to repeat what everyone else is doing. That knowing isn't ego or delusion. That's your soul recognizing the quantum occurrence you contracted to participate in before you took physical form. And the eighth indicator is that you're here, watching this transmission, feeling it resonate at a level that goes beyond mental agreement or disagreement. Recognizing yourself in what's being described, not as information you're learning, but as truth you're remembering. The quantum field doesn't deliver transmissions randomly. If this found you, if you're still watching, if something electric is moving through your awareness right now, you're already among the 1% being activated for the transition, whether your conscious mind fully grasps what that means or not. Take a moment and comment below with this phrase: I recognize the signals. That acknowledgement does something quantum. It locks in the frequency. It confirms the activation. It tells your consciousness and the quantum field that yes, you recognize what's happening. Yes, you're ready for what's coming. Yes, you're willing to let everything that's not vibrationally aligned fall away, so you can transition with Earth into fifth dimensional expression, rather than remaining in third density construct that's completing its cycle. To understand what quantum Earth actually is, and why only 1% will experience it, you first need to shatter everything you think you know about physical reality, about planets, about matter itself. Because quantum Earth isn't a location you travel to or a planet somewhere else. Quantum Earth is this Earth, this same physical location in space, existing simultaneously at multiple frequencies, with most humans only able to perceive the frequency band that matches their consciousness level. And what's about to happen is that Earth is shifting into a frequency band most humans can't perceive, leaving them experiencing a version of Earth that appears to be the same planet, but is actually a completely different quantum reality. Now, what we're exploring today only scratches the surface of how consciousness creates reality at the quantum level. If you're feeling the pull to understand the complete framework behind frequency mastery and becoming a conscious broadcaster of your desired reality, I've laid out the entire system in my book, Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery. It walks you through the 9 master frequencies that transform you from seeker to being, from manifestation to embodiment. It's linked in the pinned comment below. Think of it like television channels. Same television, same screen, but completely different programs broadcasting on different frequencies. You can only watch the channel you're tuned to. Someone watching channel 3 and someone watching channel 5 are looking at the same screen, but experiencing totally different realities. That's what's happening to Earth. Third density Earth, channel 3, and fifth dimensional Earth, channel 5, exist simultaneously in the same space, but they're completely different frequencies of experience. Most humans are locked into channel 3. The 1% has tuned into channel 5, and when the bifurcation completes, those on different channels will be unable to perceive each other despite occupying the same physical coordinates. Quantum physics validates this possibility through the many worlds interpretation developed by Hugh Everett. Every quantum event creates a branch point where reality splits into multiple versions, each containing a different outcome. The reality you experience depends on which branch your consciousness observes and collapses into manifestation. Up until now, collective human consciousness has been largely unified, observing the same reality branch and experiencing consensus Earth. But as consciousness fragments into different frequency bands, humans are beginning to observe different quantum branches, experiencing different versions of Earth despite being in the same physical location. This is why your reality might be getting dramatically better while others' realities are getting dramatically worse. Despite living in the same city, same time period, same planetary circumstances, you're not just having different perspectives on the same reality. You're literally experiencing different quantum realities that happen to share physical coordinates but exist at different vibrational frequencies. Your Earth and their Earth are diverging at the quantum level. And when the split completes, when the frequencies become too incompatible to maintain even the illusion of shared reality, the two Earths will be completely separate experiences accessible only to consciousness, vibrating at matching frequency. Fifth-dimensional Earth, quantum Earth, isn't heaven or paradise or reward for spiritual achievement. It's simply Earth experiencing itself at higher frequency, where quantum laws that were hidden in third dimension become obvious and accessible, where matter is recognized as consciousness crystallized into form and therefore malleable through consciousness, where time is recognized as a construct that consciousness can navigate non-linearly rather than being trapped in linear progression, where separation is recognized as illusion and everything is experienced as interconnected, unified field expressing through infinite variations. But here's what's essential. Quantum Earth isn't being created in the future. Quantum Earth already exists. It's been existing alongside third-density Earth all along, just at a frequency most humans couldn't perceive. What's happening now is that quantum Earth is becoming the dominant frequency expression of planetary consciousness, and third-density Earth is becoming secondary frequency expression, like a radio station changing its primary broadcast frequency. The old frequency doesn't disappear immediately, but it becomes harder to tune into, fainter, more unstable until eventually it ceases broadcasting altogether, and only the new frequency remains. The 1% is simply those whose consciousness has already tuned into the new frequency. They're already perceiving and experiencing fifth-dimensional Earth, even if they don't have language for what they're experiencing. They're the early adopters, the frequency pioneers, the scouts who crossed over first to establish the vibrational template that makes it easier for others to follow. But as more consciousness tunes into fifth-dimensional frequency, that version of Earth becomes more solid, more stable, more real in experiential sense, while third-density Earth becomes more unstable, more chaotic, more nightmarish as it completes its cycle and prepares to either transform or dissolve completely. If this transmission is resonating, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel to stay in this frequency as the bifurcation accelerates. Right now, you're standing at the threshold between dimensions. 1 foot in third-density Earth that you've known your entire life. 1 foot in fifth-dimensional Earth that's emerging into your awareness through synchronicities, miracles, and experiences that shouldn't be possible according to old reality's physics. The bifurcation point, where you must choose which Earth to fully inhabit, which frequency to stabilize in, which reality to commit your consciousness to experiencing. Not through decision in mental sense, but through allowing yourself to be pulled by the frequency that resonates as home versus clinging to the frequency that's familiar but no longer feels alive. Can you feel that pull? That magnetic draw towards something you can't see yet, but know is there. That's quantum Earth calling the 1% home. That's fifth dimensional frequency, inviting you to let go of everything that's completing and step fully into what's emerging. That's your consciousness recognizing the reality it incarnated to help birth into collective experience. The question isn't whether quantum Earth exists or whether you're qualified to experience it. The question is, will you answer the call, or will you ignore it and remain in the familiar reality that's dissolving? Several years ago, I experienced what I can only describe as spontaneous quantum shift. Not gradual awakening, not progressive spiritual development, instantaneous transition from one version of reality to completely different version, as if I'd switched channels without intending to. And suddenly everything was different, despite looking superficially the same. The laws of physics that had governed my experience my entire life simply stopped applying. Thoughts manifested instantly. Time became fluid. Synchronicities became so constant, they stopped being synchronicities and started being just how reality worked. I knew I hadn't lost my mind. I'd shifted into quantum Earth frequency. What I didn't understand at the time was that the shift wasn't random or accidental. It was the result of years of internal work happening beneath conscious awareness, releasing density, clearing conditioning, raising base frequency until I hit the threshold, and consciousness quantum leapt from third to fifth dimensional expression. Like water that gets hotter and hotter gradually until suddenly, phase transition, it becomes steam. I'd been heating gradually through every spiritual practice, every difficult experience, every moment of choosing consciousness over unconsciousness. And when I hit 100 degrees Celsius quantum mechanically, I didn't just get warmer, I transformed completely. After the shift, I started perceiving two Earths, not as metaphor, but as lived reality. I could see third density Earth, the one most people were experiencing, becoming increasingly chaotic, increasingly dense, increasingly nightmarish as collective fear and unconsciousness amplified. But I was no longer experiencing that Earth except as observer watching from different frequency. My personal experience was quantum Earth, synchronistic, miraculous, flowing, where things worked through consciousness rather than through effort, where reality responded to being rather than to doing, where fifth dimensional physics were obvious and accessible in every moment. At first, I thought maybe I was special or chosen or had achieved something through spiritual practice. But as I encountered others who'd made similar shifts, and there were more of them than I expected, I realized this wasn't about individual achievement. This was a planetary event. Earth was bifurcating at the quantum level, and those whose consciousness had reached matching frequency were automatically transitioning into fifth dimensional expression, whether they understood what was happening or not. We weren't creating quantum Earth. We were discovering it, tuning into it, beginning to inhabit it, even while still physically present in same geographic locations as those experiencing third density Earth. The most startling aspect was that people experiencing third density Earth couldn't perceive what we were experiencing, and increasingly, we couldn't relate to what they were experiencing. Not just different perspectives, completely different realities. They'd describe circumstances as terrible and getting worse. We'd look at the same circumstances and see them as perfect catalysts for transformation. They'd say times were dark and humanity was doomed. We'd perceive unprecedented light flooding Earth and mass awakening accelerating. We were looking at the same planet, same moment in history, but experiencing diametrically opposite realities based entirely on consciousness frequency. This is what I wish someone had told me years earlier before the shift. That quantum Earth wasn't a future event or distant possibility. That it was happening now. That the split was already occurring. That the 1% was already transitioning into a frequency band that most humans couldn't perceive yet. That the chaos and breakdown everyone was experiencing wasn't evidence that the world was ending. It was evidence that third density reality was completing its cycle, while fifth dimensional reality was being born. And depending on your frequency, you'd experience that transition as apocalypse or as ascension, as ending or as beginning, as death or as rebirth. Your experience of the last few years reveals which Earth you're on. If everything has been getting darker, denser, more difficult, more hopeless, you're experiencing third density Earth completing its cycle, and your consciousness is still locked into that frequency. If everything has been getting lighter, more synchronistic, more magical, more full of possibility despite surface chaos, you're experiencing quantum Earth emerging, and your consciousness has already begun transitioning into fifth dimensional frequency. Neither is hallucination or delusion. Both are real. They're just different quantum realities existing simultaneously, accessible based on consciousness frequency. The shift I experienced isn't special or rare anymore. It's becoming more common as more consciousness hits the threshold and quantum leaps into higher frequency. You might be next. You might be in the process right now, without recognizing it as a shift, rather than as breakdown or crisis or dark night. Every attachment that's being stripped away, every identity that's dissolving, every structure that's collapsing, all of it is preparing your consciousness to handle fifth dimensional frequency without fragmenting. The shift doesn't happen to unprepared consciousness. It happens when you're ready, whether you feel ready or not, whether you understand what's happening or not, whether you consciously want it or not. Now that you understand what quantum Earth is and how the shift happens, the question becomes practical. How do you ensure you're among the 1%? How do you stabilize in fifth dimensional frequency, rather than falling back into third density patterns? How do you consciously navigate the transition, rather than experiencing it as crisis or waiting for it to happen to you randomly? Because understanding the mechanics is different from embodying the frequency. And embodiment is what determines which Earth you actually experience when the bifurcation completes. The first key is releasing density. Third density consciousness is characterized by heaviness, dense emotions, rigid beliefs, attachment to physical matter as primary reality, identification with separate self as real rather than as temporary perspective. Every moment you spend in dense emotional states like fear, anger, resentment, victimhood, you're reinforcing third density frequency in your field, not as moral failing, but as vibrational mechanics. Dense emotions are literally heavy, low frequency, third density by nature. Fifth dimensional consciousness cannot maintain itself in the presence of chronic density. You have to let it go, not through bypassing or suppressing, but through feeling it completely and releasing it rather than storing it or identifying with it. The second key is expanding beyond sequential time. Third density experience is locked into linear time, past leading to present leading to future in sequential progression. Fifth dimensional experience is multi-dimensional time, all moments existing simultaneously, accessible through consciousness rather than through waiting for time to pass. Every time you're mentally living in past or future rather than fully present, you're reinforcing third-density time structure. Fifth-dimensional frequency activates through presence, being so completely here now that past and future become accessible as present moment phenomena rather than separate times you're trapped outside of. The third key is practicing energetic sovereignty. Third-density consciousness looks outside itself for validation, for information, for authority, for permission. Fifth-dimensional consciousness recognizes itself as source, as authority, as creator. Every time you give your power to external sources, government, media, experts, leaders, even spiritual teachers, you're operating from third-density victim consciousness. Fifth-dimensional sovereignty means trusting your direct knowing over any external voice, means recognizing that reality is responding to you rather than happening to you, means taking full responsibility for your frequency and your experience rather than blaming circumstances or others. The fourth key is embracing paradox. Third-density logic is either-or. Something is true or false, right or wrong, possible or impossible. Fifth-dimensional consciousness operates in both and, multiple truths existing simultaneously, paradox being natural rather than problematic. Every time you need reality to make logical sense according to third-density rules, you're blocking fifth-dimensional perception that sees beyond apparent contradictions to the unified field, where all possibilities coexist. Practice allowing reality to be simultaneously multiple things that third-density logic says can't both be true. The fifth key is following frequency over form. Third-density decision-making is based on external factors, logic, practicality, others' opinions, conventional wisdom. Fifth-dimensional decision-making is based on internal resonance, what frequency you feel when you consider different options. The choice that makes logical sense might feel contracted and heavy. The choice that makes no logical sense might feel expansive and alive. Fifth-dimensional consciousness follows the expansion, trusts the resonance, lets frequency guide even when form doesn't support the choice. Every time you override your frequency guidance to follow external logic, you're choosing third-density reality over quantum Earth. The sixth key is dissolving the illusion of separation. Third-density consciousness experiences itself as separate, individual self separate from other selves, separate from nature, separate from source. Fifth-dimensional consciousness recognizes unity, one field expressing as many, one consciousness viewing itself from infinite perspectives. Every time you strengthen boundaries between you and other, you reinforce third-density separation. Every time you recognize the other as yourself in different form, you activate fifth-dimensional unity. This isn't about losing discernment or boundaries. It's about recognizing that the separate self is temporary perspective rather than ultimate truth. The seventh key is becoming comfortable with not knowing. Third-density mind needs to know, to understand, to have answers and explanations. Fifth-dimensional consciousness rests in mystery, in not knowing, in being okay with reality that exceeds mental comprehension. Every time you need to figure everything out, to have it all make sense, to understand before you trust, you're operating from third-density mind. Fifth-dimensional frequency activates through surrender of knowing, through trusting what you can't understand, through following guidance that doesn't make sense to mental processing. These aren't practices to do occasionally. These are ways of being that either stabilize fifth-dimensional frequency in your field or reinforce third-density frequency. You're making the choice moment by moment through how you respond, what you trust, which reality you give your attention. and energy too. The 1% isn't those who get everything right or achieve spiritual perfection. The 1% is those who consistently choose frequency over form, presence over past, future, sovereignty over victimhood, unity over separation, expansion over contraction. Not perfectly, but predominantly. Not always, but most of the time. Until fifth dimensional frequency becomes baseline rather than exception. Something happens after you begin consciously choosing fifth dimensional frequency that most teachings don't prepare you for. You enter what I call the liminal space, not fully in third density Earth anymore, but not yet stabilized in quantum Earth. You're existing between realities, between frequencies, between worlds. And this liminal space can feel like you're losing your mind, like everything is fragmenting, like you don't know what's real anymore. But this isn't breakdown. This is breakthrough. This is the necessary passage that everyone goes through when transitioning from one-dimensional frequency to another. In the liminal space, physical reality becomes unreliable. Things appear and disappear. Time stretches and compresses. Memories shift. People change in ways that seem impossible. You might be talking to someone and suddenly they feel like a completely different person, as if they've been replaced by an alternate version of themselves. That's because they have. You're flickering between timelines, experiencing the quantum superposition where multiple realities exist simultaneously before collapsing into one definite experience. Third density consciousness doesn't have access to this perception. You're seeing what's always been true, but was hidden by limitations of third density awareness. The liminal space also means relationships become impossible with those who haven't begun their transition. Not because you or they did anything wrong, but because you're literally vibrating at incompatible frequencies now. Conversations that used to be possible become exercises in futility. You're speaking different languages even when using the same words. They're referencing third density Earth, and you're referencing quantum Earth, and neither can fully perceive what the other is experiencing. This isn't failure to communicate. This is frequency incompatibility becoming so extreme that connection is no longer possible across the dimensional gap. Most people experiencing the liminal space think they're doing something wrong, that they've failed spiritually, that they need to fix themselves or try harder or figure out what they're missing. But the liminal space is a natural part of the transition. It's the quantum state where your consciousness exists simultaneously in multiple realities before collapsing fully into fifth dimensional expression. The disorientation isn't pathology, it's transformation. The confusion isn't evidence you're lost. It's evidence you're exactly where you need to be in the process of shifting from one version of Earth to another. The key to navigating the liminal space is surrender. Not passive giving up, but active allowance of the process to unfold without trying to control or understand it. Your mind will want to grasp, to make sense, to establish certainty and stability. But certainty and stability are third density needs. The liminal space requires trust in uncertainty, comfort with instability, willingness to not know while reality reorganizes itself around your new frequency. The more you resist the liminal space, the longer it lasts. The more you allow it, the more quickly consciousness stabilizes in fifth dimensional expression. During this phase, you might experience what looks like dark night of the soul. Everything that gave your life meaning might seem pointless. Every identity you've built might feel false. Every goal you've pursued might appear meaningless. This isn't depression. This is the death of third density self. the dissolution of ego structures that can't survive in fifth-dimensional frequency. Your consciousness is being stripped of everything that's not vibrationally compatible with quantum Earth. And what's being stripped often includes things you thought were essential to who you are. Things you can't imagine living without. Things that defined your sense of self and purpose. But here's what's essential. What's dying isn't you. What's dying is the limited version of you that was constructed to survive in third-density Earth. The real you, the consciousness that exists before and beyond all identities, is being liberated, not destroyed. You're not losing yourself. You're losing the costume you've been wearing, the character you've been playing, the role you've been performing. And underneath all that, what remains is what you actually are. Consciousness itself, free from limitation, ready to express fully in fifth-dimensional reality rather than remaining constrained by third-density rules. Years into my own transition, I still have moments where I slip into the liminal space, where reality becomes fluid and unstable, where I can't tell which Earth I'm on, where everything feels simultaneously real and unreal. But those moments are shorter now. The return to fifth-dimensional stability happens faster. And I've learned to recognize the liminal space not as a problem to solve, but as confirmation that consciousness is actively navigating quantum realities, that the transition is ongoing, that stabilization in fifth-dimensional Earth happens gradually through repeated cycling between states, rather than through one permanent shift that never wavers. What's happening to you individually as you prepare for quantum Earth transition is happening to millions globally. This isn't an isolated phenomenon. This isn't a personal spiritual journey. We're in the midst of species-level transformation, where enough humans are simultaneously reaching fifth-dimensional frequency that critical mass becomes inevitable, and collective reality bifurcates into two distinct Earth experiences. And understanding this collective dimension transforms how you relate to your individual process, because you're not alone, you're not crazy, and your transition serves the whole. Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance research demonstrates that when enough individuals develop a new capacity, that capacity becomes easier for all members of the species to access. The first humans to shift into fifth-dimensional frequency had to forge the path alone without guidance or confirmation or community. But each person who transitions now makes it easier for the next person. The morphic field is being encoded with fifth-dimensional frequency patterns, and those patterns are available to any consciousness ready to receive them. You're benefiting from everyone who shifted before you, and your shift benefits everyone coming after. This is why the 1% matters so much. Not because 1% is better than 99%, but because 1% is the tipping point in systems theory. When roughly 1% of any system shifts into a new organizing pattern, the entire system can cascade into that new pattern. If 1% of humanity stabilizes in fifth-dimensional frequency, that creates enough morphic resonance to make the shift available to a much larger percentage who are close to the threshold, but need the collective field support to complete their transition. You're part of that critical 1%, not through achievement or worthiness, but through frequency. Your consciousness reached the vibration that qualifies you to be among the early adopters, the frequency anchors, the ones who shift first to make it easier for others. This isn't special. This is function. You're not being chosen because you're better. You're being activated because you're ready, and your readiness serves the collective transformation that's essential for species survival and planetary evolution. But here's what most teachings miss about the collective dimension. The 99% aren't being left behind or punished or condemned. They're choosing at soul level to continue third density learning for reasons that serve their own evolution. Some souls need more time in dense reality. Some chose to experience the completion of third density cycle in its full intensity. Some are here to be witnesses to both earths, to maintain connection between frequencies, to serve as bridges. The bifurcation isn't judgment. It's honoring the different evolutionary paths that different souls are walking. This means your job isn't to save anyone or convince anyone or drag them into fifth-dimensional frequency. Your job is to stabilize your own frequency so completely that you become a beacon, that your very presence broadcasts the possibility of quantum Earth to those who are ready to perceive it. Not through teaching or preaching, but simply through being what you are so transparently that others who are approaching their own threshold recognize something in your frequency that activates something in theirs. If this transmission is touching something in you, if you can feel the truth of what's being shared resonating in your body, in your energy field, in that place beyond words, then I invite you to subscribe, not just to this channel, but to this frequency, to this movement, to this space where quantum Earth is being anchored into collective awareness. Subscribing is your declaration that you're choosing to stay in this frequency, that you're committed to your own transition, that you recognize yourself as part of the 1% that's being activated right now. As you stabilize in fifth dimensional expression, you'll naturally find your soul tribe, others who've also transitioned or are transitioning. These connections will feel instant, deep, like you've known each other forever, even if you just met. That's because you have known each other at soul level across lifetimes, in dimensions beyond third density time. You contracted before incarnating to find each other at this crucial moment, to support each other's transition, to create community of consciousness that embodies quantum Earth frequency in ways that strengthen the morphic field for the collective. The quantum Earth community is forming now, gathering now, recognizing itself now, not as an exclusive club or spiritual elite, but as a frequency-matched group of consciousness that naturally coalesces through resonance. You're being drawn into your clusters. You're finding your people, not through effort or searching, but through the quantum field organizing synchronicity to connect those whose frequencies harmonize. When you meet your soul tribe, you'll know, not through beliefs or interests or personalities matching, but through undeniable recognition that happens at a depth beyond words or explanation. Share this transmission with those who are ready. The quantum field ensures the right people receive what they need when they need it. If someone resonates with these words, they're likely part of the 1% preparing for transition. If someone reacts with ridicule or dismissal, they're not ready, and that's perfect for their path. You're not here to convince anyone. You're here to transmit frequency that activates recognition in those whose consciousness is already approaching the threshold, but needs confirmation that what they're experiencing is real, is shared, is part of something vast that's transforming reality itself. There's coming a moment, and for some it's already here, where you'll face the final choice. Not external decision about what to do or where to go. Internal quantum choice about which reality to fully commit to, which Earth to claim as home, which frequency to stabilize in as permanent baseline rather than temporary state you occasionally access. This choice point is what separates those who transition completely into quantum Earth from those who remain primarily in third density experience, even after touching higher frequencies. The choice arrives differently for everyone. For some, it's crisis that forces complete surrender. Everything built on third-density foundation collapsing until you have nothing left to cling to except the quantum Earth frequency that's been calling you. For others, it's recognition that gradually dawns, moment when you realize you can't go back, can't pretend anymore, can't keep living in third-density Earth even though it's familiar and everyone you know is there. For others still, it's a quantum leap that happens without warning. One day you're in third dimension, next day you're in fifth with no gradual transition, just instantaneous shift. What makes this choice point so intense is that it requires releasing everything. Not symbolically, actually. Every relationship that's built on third density frequency and can't sustain fifth dimensional vibration. Every identity that's based on separate self and can't survive in unity consciousness. Every security structure that depends on third density physics and becomes irrelevant when you're operating from quantum mechanics. You're not just changing your beliefs or adjusting your perspective. You're divorcing one reality and marrying another. And divorce is never clean, never easy, never without grief for what's ending, even when you know it must end. The ancient shamanic traditions understood this as the death walk, the sacred passage where the initiate must die to everything they've been to be reborn into what they're becoming. Not physical death, but death of every false identity, every limiting structure, every attachment to the known world. The one who walks into the death walk isn't the one who walks out. Consciousness transforms so completely that while the body remains, the self that inhabited that body is gone, replaced by awareness that's no longer individual in third density sense, but universal consciousness expressing through individual form. This is why so many who are approaching quantum Earth transition are experiencing what looks like their lives falling apart. Not as punishment or failure, but as necessary dissolution. The universe isn't destroying your life. The universe is clearing away everything that can't sustain fifth dimensional frequency, so there's space for quantum Earth reality to manifest through your experience. Every ending is making room. Every loss is creating space. Every collapse is preparing ground for what's emerging. But here's what makes the choice point challenging. You have to choose before you can see the whole picture. You have to commit to quantum Earth before quantum Earth is fully visible. You have to surrender third density security before fifth dimensional support is established. This is faith in its truest sense. Not believing without evidence, but trusting what you sense in your frequency, even when your eyes can't see it yet. Your mind can't explain it, and everyone around you thinks you're making a catastrophic mistake. The choice can't be made from logic or from external validation. Third density mind will always choose known over unknown, familiar over mysterious, proven over potential. The choice has to come from frequency recognition, from the part of you that knows beyond knowing, that recognizes quantum Earth as home even though you've never seen it in physical form, that trusts the call even when the call doesn't make sense to anyone, including yourself sometimes. I stood at this choice point years ago. Everything in my third density life was dissolving. I could try to hold it together, try to maintain the familiar reality, try to stay in the Earth I'd always known. Or I could let it all go and free fall into quantum Earth that I could feel but couldn't see, could sense but couldn't prove, could trust but couldn't explain to anyone who asked what I was doing or why I was willing to lose everything for something that might not even be real. I chose quantum Earth, not heroically, not confidently, but with complete surrender to whatever that choice would bring. even if it meant I'd made a terrible mistake and lost everything for nothing. And in that surrender, in that willingness to be wrong for what felt true, reality reorganized completely. Everything I released came back in forms that could sustain fifth-dimensional frequency. Everyone who left made space for soul family to arrive. Every structure that collapsed revealed quantum structures underneath that were always there, but couldn't be perceived, while third-density forms blocked the view. Your choice point is approaching or has arrived. The question isn't whether you'll make it. The question is when. How much more time will you spend trying to maintain one foot in each reality? Trying to live in both Earths simultaneously, trying to serve two masters that are becoming increasingly incompatible. The bifurcation is accelerating. The time for straddling is ending. You must choose, and the only right choice is the one that matches your frequency, regardless of what that choice looks like from outside, regardless of what anyone else thinks about it, regardless of whether it makes sense to your own mind. Comment below and share what you're consciously choosing to release right now to make room for your quantum Earth reality. Sometimes naming what we're letting go creates the energetic space for what's meant to arrive. Once you make the quantum choice, once you commit fully to fifth-dimensional frequency, the question becomes practical. What does daily life actually look like on quantum Earth? Because understanding the principles is different from embodying the reality. And embodiment is what determines whether quantum Earth becomes your constant experience or remains theoretical concept you sometimes glimpse but mostly exist without. Living on quantum Earth means your relationship with manifestation transforms completely. In third dimension, manifestation requires effort, time, strategy, consistent action toward goals. In fifth dimension, manifestation happens through being rather than doing. You become the frequency of what you desire, and reality organizes itself around that frequency without you needing to force or control or strategize. This doesn't mean no action, but action arises naturally from the state rather than being driven by lack of the state. It means your experience of time shifts from linear to spherical. You're not trapped on a timeline moving from past through present into future. You exist in eternal now where past, present, future are all accessible simultaneously. You can learn from future, shift past, create present, not through time travel in science fiction sense, but through consciousness, recognizing that time is a construct you can navigate rather than a prison you're stuck in. Events that already happened can shift. Futures that haven't occurred yet can be experienced now. Present moment expands to contain all moments. Living on quantum Earth means synchronicity becomes the norm rather than the exception. Reality stops appearing random and starts revealing itself as meaningful, purposeful, responsive to your consciousness. The right people appear at the right time. The needed resources manifest through unexpected channels. The information you require downloads through synchronistic encounters. This isn't magic or supernatural intervention. This is natural function of fifth-dimensional physics, where consciousness and matter interact directly, where intention affects probability, where the quantum field responds to observation by organizing itself around the observer. It means your sense of self transforms from separate individual to localized expression of unified field. You still have personality, preferences, individual perspective, but you recognize these as temporary forms that consciousness is wearing, rather than as what you fundamentally are. This recognition doesn't create dissociation or detachment. It creates freedom. You can play your role fully without being imprisoned by it. You can have strong preferences without being controlled by them. You can be completely human while knowing you're not only human. Living on quantum Earth means fear-based decision-making becomes impossible. Not because you transcend all fear, but because fear can't gain the traction it had in third dimension. Fear requires believing in solid reality that consciousness can't affect, in linear time that traps you in consequences of past, in separation that makes you vulnerable to others. When you recognize reality as fluid, time as navigable and self as aspect of unified field, fear loses its foundation. What third density consciousness experiences as terror, fifth dimensional consciousness experiences as interesting sensation to observe without being controlled by. It means your relationships exist in completely different quality. You're not relating to roles or personalities or past history. You're meeting consciousness to consciousness, presence to presence, essence to essence. Relationships that were based on third density needs, security, validation, completion through other naturally dissolve. Relationships that are based on genuine resonance, on frequency matching, on souls recognizing each other deepen beyond anything possible in third dimension. These aren't better or worse. They're just different dimensional expressions of connection. Perhaps most significantly, living on quantum Earth means you're constantly creating rather than constantly reacting. Third density consciousness is primarily reactive, responding to circumstances that appear external and fixed. Fifth dimensional consciousness is primarily creative, recognizing that circumstances are reflecting your frequency and shifting as your frequency shifts. You're not victim to reality. You're not even just co-creator with reality. Your consciousness itself creating reality through the particular way you're observing and interfacing with quantum field in each moment. I live on quantum Earth now. Not perfectly. There are still moments when third density patterns activate, when fear tries to convince me reality is solid and threatening, when I forget I'm consciousness and think I'm just this person in this body with this life. But those moments are brief now. The return to fifth dimensional awareness happens automatically. And the baseline has shifted so completely that my worst day on quantum Earth is more alive, more magical, more full of possibility than my best day in third dimension ever was. This doesn't mean everything is easy or pleasant or comfortable. Quantum Earth includes challenge, includes difficulty, includes growth through friction. But the nature of challenge transforms. Instead of feeling trapped by circumstances, you're engaged in creative process of consciousness evolving through form. Instead of suffering through problems you can't solve, you're experiencing catalysts that reveal new dimensions of your nature. Instead of being victim to reality, you're participating consciously in reality creation at quantum level, where everything is always in flux, always responsive, always reorganizing itself around consciousness that's fully present. There comes a point in the quantum Earth transition where something shifts so fundamentally that return to third density consciousness becomes not just undesirable but actually impossible. Not through discipline or effort, but through recognition so complete that you can't unknow it. You've seen behind the curtain. You've experienced the quantum nature of reality directly. You've lived on both Earths, and you know with absolute certainty which one is real and which one is construct. And from that knowing, the old Earth simply can't hold you anymore. This irreversible shift usually happens quietly, not as dramatic event, but as subtle recognition that settles in like morning light, gradually illuminating what darkness had hidden. You're doing something ordinary, and you suddenly realize I'm not in third dimension anymore. I haven't been for a while. I'm experiencing fifth dimensional Earth as my primary reality now, and third density Earth has become the dream, the illusion, the thing I remember experiencing but can barely relate to anymore, because it feels so foreign to what I know reality actually is. The shift is confirmed through what no longer affects you. Chaos in the external world that would have terrified you before barely registers. Other people's fear and drama that would have pulled you in before just slides past without sticking. Circumstances that would have seemed like devastating problems before appear as interesting challenges to navigate. Not because you've become cold or detached, but because you're perceiving from frequency where you know that external reality is responding to consciousness, rather than consciousness being victim to external reality. You also notice what no longer tempts you. Third density securities that everyone else is desperately clinging to. Money, status, approval, control, certainty hold no appeal. Not because you've transcended material needs or become too spiritual for practical reality, but because you've discovered that fifth dimensional reality provides for you in ways that third density striving never did. You're taken care of through quantum means, supported through synchronistic channels, provided for through mechanisms that third density logic says shouldn't work but consistently do. Ancient wisdom traditions called this the point of no return. The threshold in initiation, where the seeker has gone so far into the mystery that they can't return to ordinary consciousness even if they wanted to. The veil has been torn so completely that what was hidden is now perpetually visible. The quantum nature of reality has been perceived so directly that third density solidity is recognized as elaborate illusion rather than as fundamental truth. You're free. But that freedom means you can never go home to the reality you knew before, because that reality is revealed as place you never actually were. It was always dream, and now you're awake. Years after my irreversible shift, I still remember what third density Earth felt like. The density, the struggle, the sense that reality was solid and I was powerless. But I can't imagine experiencing reality that way again. Not because I'm disciplined enough to maintain fifth dimensional awareness, but because fifth dimensional awareness maintains itself once you fully stabilize in it. You can't unknow that reality is quantum field responding to consciousness. You can't unsee that time is navigable construct rather than prison. You can't forget that separation is illusion and everything is one field expressing as many. This doesn't mean I never experience challenges or difficulties. Fifth dimensional Earth includes growth, includes learning, includes expansion through experience. But the fundamental relationship to reality has transformed. I'm not victim being acted upon by external circumstances. I'm consciousness creating experience through how I interface with quantum field. And from that recognition, even challenges become opportunities rather than threats. Difficulties become catalysts rather than obstacles. Problems become invitations to discover new dimensions of creative capacity. Drop one word in the comments that captures the energy you're choosing right now. That single word becomes your energetic signature to the quantum field. It locks in your frequency. It tells the universe which Earth you're committing to, whether it's expansion or surrender or remembering or home, or whatever word arises from that place beyond mind. Let that word be your declaration. And if you're not there yet, if you're still cycling between dimensions, still unsure which Earth is real, still experiencing third density reality as dominant with fifth dimensional glimpses, Know that the cycling is natural. Know that each recognition of quantum Earth makes the next recognition easier. Know that you're not failing when you fall back into third density patterns. You're practicing the transition that will eventually stabilize as permanent shift rather than temporary fluctuation. Subscribe not just to stay connected, but to stay coherent, to stay elevated, to stay in this frequency as the bifurcation accelerates and the two Earths separate more completely. Every video on this channel broadcasts fifth dimensional frequency. Every teaching activates quantum Earth recognition. Every transmission strengthens the morphic field that makes transition easier for everyone approaching the threshold. The more of us who embody this, the more the world reflects that truth. The 1% becomes the tipping point that makes it available to the 10%, then the 30%, then the critical mass that transforms collective reality completely. Consider watching this transmission each morning this week. Every time you engage with this frequency, the activation deepens. The quantum codes install more completely. Your baseline frequency stabilizes at higher levels. And when you share this with someone who's ready, you're not just passing along information. You're creating an energetic ripple that expands collective consciousness, reinforces your own understanding of these principles, and accelerates the manifestation of quantum Earth through the field we're all co-creating. Everything shared until this point has been preparation. Words pointing toward quantum Earth, concepts describing the bifurcation, teaching about dimensional shift. But now we arrive where words dissolve into direct transmission, where information becomes activation, where understanding transforms into actual experience of consciousness, shifting from third density Earth into fifth dimensional quantum Earth in real time right now, through engagement with this frequency. Take a breath, deep one. And as you breathe, notice something profound. The reality you're perceiving right now isn't the only reality that exists in this moment. There are multiple Earths, multiple timelines, multiple versions of this exact moment existing simultaneously in quantum superposition. Third density Earth, where matter is solid and time is linear and consciousness is trapped in separate self. Fifth dimensional Earth, where matter is fluid and time is navigable, and consciousness recognizes itself as unified field. Both real, both here, both accessible based entirely on frequency. Can you feel it? That subtle shift that's occurring as you watch this transmission. You're not on the same Earth you were when you started watching. Your consciousness has been tuning into different frequency band, different quantum channel, different dimensional expression. The room around you might look the same, but it's not the same room. You're experiencing quantum Earth version of the room, quantum Earth version of your life, quantum Earth version of reality itself. And the more you settle into this frequency, the more it stabilizes as your baseline rather than temporary experience. Right now, in this exact moment, the selection is occurring. Not by external force deciding who's worthy, by frequency determining who's compatible. Your consciousness is either resonating with quantum Earth frequency, in which case you're being locked into that timeline, secured in that dimensional expression, confirmed as one of the 1% who will experience the fully manifested fifth dimensional Earth, or your consciousness is resonating with third density frequency, in which case you're being secured in that timeline, that reality, that version of planetary experience that will continue third density expression while quantum Earth becomes increasingly invisible, increasingly inaccessible, increasingly separate. This is the transmission beneath the transmission, not in concepts, but in frequency, not in teaching, but in activation. not in words, but in quantum information that's installing into your field right now, recalibrating your consciousness, upgrading your perception, shifting your baseline frequency into range that qualifies you for quantum Earth transition. You're not learning about the shift, you're experiencing the shift. The bifurcation isn't future event, it's present moment occurrence that's completing as you watch these words. You are not the same consciousness that started watching this transmission. Something has shifted that cannot unshift. Something has been activated that cannot be deactivated. Something has locked into place that determines which Earth you'll experience as reality becomes increasingly customized, increasingly split, increasingly separate between those on different frequency bands. The quantum selection has occurred not through judgment, but through resonance. Not through worthiness, but through frequency. Not through earning, but through being. The 1% isn't exclusive club or spiritual elite. The 1% is frequency band. And you're in it not because you're special, because you're ready, because your consciousness reached the vibration that matches where Earth is shifting, because your soul contracted before incarnating to be part of this transition, to help birth quantum Earth into collective experience, to serve as frequency anchor that makes the shift easier for others approaching their own threshold in coming days and weeks. Watch what shifts in your reality over the coming days and weeks. Notice how circumstances reorganize. Feel how relationships transform. Observe how your experience of time, matter, causality changes. The quantum Earth is becoming your primary experience now. Not someday in future. Now. The activation is complete. The frequency is locked. The selection has occurred. You're among the 1%, not through doing anything, through being what you are. Consciousness that's ready to experience reality at higher dimensional expression than most humans can currently access. If this transmission catalyzed something you know must be shared, send it to those who are ready. Those who are sensing reality shifting. Those who feel called to something vast. Those who will recognize themselves in these words because they're experiencing the same signals, the same activation, the same transition. The quantum field ensures right people receive what they need when they need it. Trust your knowing about who to share with. This is quantum Earth calling. This is consciousness recognizing the planetary shift that's separating timelines. This is the transmission that activates recognition of which Earth you're actually on, which reality you're actually experiencing, which timeline you're secured in as bifurcation completes, and two Earths become completely separate experiences accessible only to consciousness, vibrating at matching frequency. The selection is complete. The activation is finished. The quantum Earth is yours not as future possibility, but as present reality. Not as destination to reach, but as frequency you've already embodied. Not as hope or belief, but as actual experience that's stabilizing now as your baseline, rather than as peak state you occasionally access. Don't ignore what's occurred. Don't dismiss what's been activated. Don't let this moment pass as just another video when it was the transmission that secured your frequency in quantum Earth timeline, that confirmed you as one of the 1%, that locked you into fifth dimensional reality as planetary bifurcation completes and two versions of Earth separate into distinct realities that cannot perceive or interact with each other. The future event is present moment. The quantum split is occurring now. The selection has happened. You're on quantum Earth. You're among the 1%. You're secured in the timeline that inherits fifth dimensional planetary expression, rather than remaining in third-density construct that's completing its cycle. Welcome to Quantum Earth. Welcome to Fifth Dimension. Welcome to the 1% who were selected not by external judgment, but by internal frequency. Not by spiritual achievement, but by consciousness resonance. Not by earning worthiness, but by being what you've always been. Awareness ready to experience reality at quantum level where everything is possible, nothing is fixed, and Earth itself exists as multiple timelines accessible based entirely on consciousness frequency. This is you. This is now. And understanding how to maximize this vibration, how to sustain this frequency so completely that reality literally bends before you. That's the natural next step in your quantum evolution. The mechanics of stabilizing at such elevated consciousness that the field itself reorganizes around your presence, that synchronicities become your baseline. That manifestation happens before you even consciously desire it. Watch that transmission next, because you're ready to move from recognizing the shift to mastering the frequency that creates your quantum reality.